Hey everybody, and welcome to our next video in determining our sale price. And this one we're going to talk about gross profit method. So first off, what is gross profit? Well, gross profit is the money made from sales after food and beverage are deducted, like contribution margin, but refers to total sales over a period of time. So what it is the dollar amount per dish that we sell. So go back to the hamburger. If we were selling the hamburger for $2, our gross profit is $8. If we're selling for $10, right? Sorry, if our recipe cost us $2 and we were selling it for $10, then our gross profit is $8, right? So why do we even talk about this method? Well, it works really well in coffee shops and places where you have a minimal food cost for your dish. Think of a cup of coffee, right? A cup of coffee is going to cost maybe 50 cents in food cost. So if we had even had a 25% food cost and we did the old gross profit method to figure out what our selling price is, we wouldn't even be over $1. We may be $1.25 or something like that for a coffee. With 75% or 75 cents in gross profit, we're going to have to sell a ton of coffees in order to pay our rent, let alone our labor and other costs, right? So with gross profit method, we determine a gross profit needed that we need to add to the cost of every dish in order to pay for our labor costs, pay for our rent, and things like that based on the volume that we're selling. So you can see this formula they've got up here. Gross profit over a period divided by the number of customers in that period will tell us what our current gross profit dollar is per person that comes into the store. Once we know what the cost is of our muffin or our coffee or whatever we're selling in our coffee shop, we can add that gross profit on. And generally that's going to be a very high percentage based on a very small cost proportion. That's why we use the gross profit method, because we would, although our percentages would look really good using a food cost percentage method, we're not going to generate enough physical dollars to pay for all our costs. Okay, so here's an example. So each month the restaurant has a gross profit of $2,890 and serves 1,000 customers. A sandwich costs $1.47 per portion, and so using gross profit method, what are we going to sell our sandwich for? So the first thing we need to do is determine what our gross profit per customer is. And that is really simple. We had $2,890 in gross profit divided by 1,000 customers is going to give me $2.89 in gross profit. Now if our sandwich costs us $1.47 and we add our gross profit, my pencil works, plus 289, we end up with a selling price of $4.36. So that's what we need to sell our sandwich for using gross profit method. So generally this is going to come up, well, here, why do we use gross profit method? Well, it's appropriate for low cost items that are similar in cost to each other, like a coffee shop, right? So food cost on a muffin, 25 cents. If we set a food cost percent even at 25%, we're going to sell a muffin for $1 and make 75 cents for every muffin we sell. It's going to take a lot of muffins in order to pay our rent. So we need to have higher profit margins as a percentage for coffee shops because we need to work on volume, and we can't base them off our food cost percentage because we're not going to make enough physical dollars to pay those big expenses, right? Because gross profit per customer is added, not multiplied, sales remain in a narrow range of items that only vary in cost by a few pennies and may be quite different for percentage wise. So you have 6 different muffins on your menu in your coffee shop. Generally the food cost is going to vary by maybe a couple of pennies, right? 25 cents for this muffin, 27 cents for that muffin, 23 cents for that muffin, right? So if we just add on our needed gross profit for each one of those, we're going to get enough money to pay our labor cost and our rent and all our operating expenses. But we don't have that variation in costs, right? We don't have this muffin's now going to cost $4 and this muffin's going to cost $6, right? Based on percentages. So it keeps the prices in a fairly narrow range, okay? So that's the video on gross profit method. The next one we're going to talk about base pricing methods.